Hello! Welcome to English for Shared. Here, you learn English with a very interesting story. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Let's go!
The story of David and Goliath. Courage in the face of giants. Some stories endure through the centuries and remain alive because they carry a powerful truth. The story of David and Goliath is one of those stories that never fades. More than a simple battle tale, it speaks of courage, faith, and how a heart trusting in God can overcome even the greatest challenges. Imagine an entire army paralyzed by fear, while a single giant with immense size and a menacing voice challenges an entire people. This was the scenario of Israel facing Goliath. Everyone saw an impossible obstacle, but God was already preparing someone unlikely to change the course of that war. This someone was not a trained warrior, nor a man seasoned in combat. He was just a young shepherd, accustomed to tending sheep and playing his harp. In human eyes, he stood no chance, but in God's eyes, he had everything: faith, courage, and obedience. In this narrative, we'll relive every detail of this moving story. We'll feel the people's fear, the giant's arrogance, and most importantly, David's unshakable confidence. In the end, we'll see that this isn't just an ancient story, but a living lesson for all of us. With God on our side, there's no giant we can't conquer. The Giant's Challenge. The war between Israel and the Philistines had been going on for days. The two armies positioned themselves on opposite hills, separated by a valley. On one side, King Saul and his soldiers; on the other, the mighty Philistine army. The tension was so great that it seemed the air weighed down on everyone. It was then that the figure that paralyzed Israel appeared, Goliath of Gath, a warrior nearly 10 feet tall. His bronze armor weighed more than many men could carry. The tip of his spear alone weighed as much as a full spear. He seemed invincible, a living wall that dared anyone to face him. Every day, morning and evening, Goliath came down to the valley and issued his challenge. "Choose a man to fight me. If he wins, we will be your servants. But if I win, you will be our slaves." His voice echoed across the mountains, bringing fear and shame to the people of Israel. For 40 days straight on, the scene repeated itself. Goliath appeared, mocked the army, and ridiculed the God of Israel. And for 40 days, no one dared to face him. Even Saul, who was the king and should have been the first to fight, trembled before the giant. The soldiers' hearts filled with fear. They looked at Goliath's height, the gleam of his armor, and the strength of his words. To human eyes, there was no hope. It seemed Israel was doomed to live under the Philistine slavery. But God, who always acts in unexpected ways, was already preparing someone unlikely to change the course of that story. And that someone was not part of the army. A young shepherd. While fear gripped the battlefield, far away in the hills of Bethlehem, a young man calmly tended his sheep. His name was David, the youngest son of Jesse. Still a teenager, he didn't look like a warrior, but he had a heart full of courage and trust in God. David spent his days tending his flock, playing the harp, and meditating on the greatness of the Lord. But even in his simple farm life, he had faced danger. When a lion or a bear attacked his sheep, David would chase them down and, with his own hands, defeat them. This silent training prepared him for something much greater. One day, Jesse summoned David and gave him a mission. 3 of his brothers were in Saul's army, fighting the Philistines. Jesse asked David to bring them food and news from the battlefield. David readily obeyed, leaving his sheep with a trusted keeper. Upon reaching the camp, David heard the sound everyone had feared. Goliath was once again shouting his challenge, defying Israel and mocking God. The young shepherd was outraged. As the soldiers trembled, David asked, "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the army of the living God?" Some soldiers rebuked him, saying he was just curious. Even his brothers were irritated by his boldness, thinking he was just showing off. But David's words revealed something greater, a faith that was undeterred by the enemy's size. And so it was, amidst everyone's mockery and fear, that the young shepherd began to stand out. His heart was ready to take on the challenge no one else dared.
David's indignation. David's bold words quickly spread among the soldiers. Many laughed, finding it impossible that a young shepherd could even consider facing Goliath. But there was something different about that steady gaze, that voice filled with confidence. While everyone saw the giant's size, David saw the power of God. Soon his words reached King Saul. Intrigued, the king sent for him. When David entered his tent, Saul could hardly believe his eyes. A frail young man, with no experience in war, claiming to fight the greatest warrior of the Philistines. "You cannot face this giant," Saul said, looking at him seriously. "Goliath has been a soldier since his youth, and you are still just a boy." But David did not back down. He recounted his experiences in the field with a firm grip. "When lions and bears attacked the flock, I fought them and defeated them. The Lord delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear, and he will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." David's words touched the king's heart. It wasn't arrogance, it was faith. It wasn't bravado, it was conviction. Saul then agreed, "Go, and may the Lord be with you." Amidst the camp, the soldiers whispered. Some scoffed, others doubted, but a flame of hope began to ignite. Could this young man, so unlikely, truly defeat the giant no one dared face? Thus, David's indignation became a mission. He was not just willing to fight, he was determined to show that victory did not depend on human strength, but on the power of the God of Israel. Preparing for battle. Before facing the giant, Saul tried to equip David. They brought his own royal armor, a bronze helmet, and a sword. The soldiers helped dress the young shepherd, but he could hardly walk with so much weight. It was as if he were trapped inside something not made for him. David took a few steps and shook his head. "I can't fight like this. I'm not used to it." He removed each piece of armor and returned it to the king. Many looked on in disbelief. How could anyone face a warrior without any protection? But David knew his trust wasn't in human weapons. He went down to the stream and calmly chose 5 smooth stones. He put them in his shepherd's bag, took out his sling, and held his staff tightly. That was all he needed. Simple to human eyes, but sufficient when one had faith in God. Across the valley, Goliath spotted the young man approaching. Realizing he wore neither sword nor armor, the giant began to laugh. He shouted in contempt, "Am I a dog that you come to me with clubs? Come, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field." But David was not intimidated. He boldly responded, "You come against me with sword, spear, and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, whom you have defied." His words resonated louder than the giant's own voice. As the entire army held its breath, the unlikely confrontation approached. On one side, the iron-clad giant. On the other, a young shepherd armed only with faith. Israel's fate would be decided in moments.
The confrontation. Silence fell over the valley. On one side, the giant Goliath advanced slowly, each step echoing like thunder. On the other, David ran toward him, light, steady, and confident. It was the most unlikely scene of a battle. A young shepherd facing the greatest warrior of the Philistines. Goliath raised his spear in contempt. He saw David as nothing more than a brash boy, worthless in the face of his strength. His laughter echoed across the field, filling the hearts of the Israelite soldiers with even more fear. But David was undeterred. He picked up a stone, placed it in his sling, and began swinging it through the air. His eyes were fixed on the giant, but his heart was completely surrendered to God. He knew this wasn't just his fight, it was the Lord's battle. With a swift, sure motion, David threw the stone.
The projectile sliced through the air and struck Goliath square in the forehead. The stunned giant staggered for a moment, then fell to the ground with a crash. For a second, there was absolute silence. No one could believe what had just happened. The invincible Goliath lay on the ground, defeated by a mere young man. The impossible had become reality before everyone's eyes. Then David ran to the giant's body, pulled out Goliath's enormous sword, and with it finished the battle. The one who seemed unbeatable was defeated, not by human strength, but by the power of the God of Israel. God's victory. When the Philistine army saw their hero defeated, they panicked. Fear gripped them, and they began to flee. On the other side, the Israelites, previously terrified, now shouted with joy. Filled with courage, they advanced against their enemies and pursued them far away. David, the young shepherd whom no one believed in, changed the course of a war. He not only defeated a giant, but also proved that true victory comes not by the sword, nor by strength, but by trust in God. The entire people marveled at this feat. Saul, impressed, summoned David and wanted to know more about the young man who had freed Israel. But for David, the glory was not his. He knew it all happened because God was on his side. The story of David and Goliath spread quickly. In every village, in every town, everyone told how a young man, with a stone and a sling, defeated the giant who terrorized Israel. It was living proof that God uses the unlikely to accomplish great things. This wasn't just a victory of a young man against a warrior. It was the victory of faith over fear, of trust over doubt, of God over human pride. David showed that when we surrender our battles to the Lord, no giant is too big. And so, that story has passed down through generations, reaching us as an eternal reminder. No matter the size of your challenge, if God is with you, victory is already certain.
Conclusion. The story of David and Goliath isn't just an ancient tale. It's a living message, spanning centuries and reaching us with the same power. It teaches us that when faced with the giants we face, whether they be problems, fears, or challenges, we don't need to be paralyzed. Like David, we can trust that God is greater than any obstacle. We often look back at our struggles and feel small, weak, or unprepared. But David's victory shows that it's not the size of the sword, the armor, or the strength that determines the outcome. It's faith, courage, and trust in God that change everything.
The young shepherd defeated the giant because he didn't look at his own limitations, but at the Lord's power. He inspires us to exchange fear for confidence, doubt for hope, and insecurity for the certainty that we are never alone in our battles. So, with every challenge that arises, let us remember, with God, no giant is invincible. He strengthens us, guides us, and gives us victory. May David's story be an eternal reminder for us that true faith can transform the impossible into reality.